Bearer of bad news for a change.
That's too bad.
You know,
We've had enough of that.
well, I think in the long run, it'll be for the good, but you know, today it didn't really feel as good as I'm hoping it will be in the long run. So, you know, trust the process, as they say.
Exactly.
Yes.
Those are tough ones.
So we are recording and we are live.
Okay, great. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Susan Petto, and I'd like to call to order the meeting of the IDA Audit Committee of the City of Albany Industrial Development Agency. We will note that all members of the Audit Committee are present with the exception of Bob Schofield, who we expect will be joining us shortly. But we'll go ahead and entertain a motion to waive the reading of the minutes, given that they were previously dispensed. Motion? Darius?
Am I on here? All right.
You are.
So moved. I think you'll have to second, Susan.
Thank you. I second. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
All right, we'll move on to approval of the meeting of the minutes of the meeting of October 14th, 2020.
So moved.
Thank you. I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Meeting minutes are approved. We have no unfinished business today, so we'll move right into new business, and we will begin with a review of the draft 2020 audited financial statements. We have with us today Emily and Nate from Tilbecker Tremonte, who will review those statements with us. We will note that Catherine Duran, who is the lead shareholder with Tilbecker Tremonte, is in her 4th full year of serving as the managing partner on our audits. And we thank everyone who's been involved, because so far the process has been very smooth in spite of a rather challenging year. And we'll get into some of those details shortly. So Emily and Nate, like to go ahead?
Thanks, Susan. Thank you. So we first just wanted to start off by thanking Mark and his team for all of their help during the audit. It's always great working with them, but especially this year, everything being remote, we really appreciate all of their help and assistance coordinating everything. It was very smooth, so thank you. First, we'd like to start off with the financial statements. In the report package, the first 2 pages are the independent auditor's report. And similar to previous years, we have issued an unmodified or a clean opinion, meaning that we found nothing to cause us to modify our opinion. There were no new accounting standards this year for the IDA. So in terms of disclosures, things are pretty consistent from last year. We did want to point out on the statement of net position, on the bottom of the page, it's page number 8, that this year there is a few new disclosures related to the escrow account. So what we have here is a restricted cash escrow account of the $50,000. It's the second line under current assets. And this represents the check that is held with the attorney. And then in the current liabilities section, we've reported a deferred revenue for the same amount. And essentially, each year going forward, as the expenses are paid and the IDA is performing their service per the agreement with the CAC, what will happen as you pay those expenses, the restricted cash escrow account balance will decrease. And then as you're performing those services, you will at the same time also be reducing that deferred revenue account and also recording a fee income. So each year, the activity on the statement of revenue and expenses will be shown just any other fee income, because that's what it is. That's what the IDA is doing. They're performing a service and incurring expenses. And what will happen is those amounts will net to zero, because you're not making a profit on that transaction at all. So it's really just the way of recording it for accounting purposes. So at the end of the day, eventually when that transaction is complete, your restricted cash escrow balance will be depleted down to zero, as well as that deferred revenue. And all of the income and expense activity will net down to zero at the end. Another new item on the statement of net position we wanted to mention was the property and equipment that's new this year. That was for the streaming equipment that was purchased. So that's a new disclosure. And in the footnotes, we have a little bit more detail about that, as well as the depreciation that will continue on until it's fully depreciated. So that's disclosed in a little more detail in the footnotes. Let's see. We also wanted to point out in footnote number 1 at the bottom of the page, it's page number 11. This is the beginning of the cash equivalents and restricted cash footnote. And then if you go to the next page there, page 12, the very end of the cash equivalents and restricted cash footnote, this just gives a little bit more detail about that escrow account, just stating that it's required with an agreement with the Capitalized Albany Corporation. And it's just stating that this is restricted for use because it's just for a specific purpose. So that's why it's disclosed separately there. We also wanted to point out on page 14, this is footnote number 3, the property and equipment. As I mentioned before, this was for the streaming equipment. So here we just list out the full cost of the asset as well as any accumulated depreciation. And then that net number is what is shown on the statement of net position. And we'll also disclose the depreciation expense that was incurred each year until it's fully depreciated. On the next page, page 15, footnote number 6, we have received back all of the revenue bond confirmations. So we do have a final number for the total outstanding bonds, which is $61,357,729. So that number will be updated and final with the final reports. I believe it's still highlighted yellow on your end, but that's just because we just received back those confirmations this week, which is great. Usually we have to wait a little while down to the wire for those, but Mark and his group were really great helping us get those back from the banks. So we're all set on that, which is great news. We also wanted to mention at the bottom of page 15, again, we have note number 8. This is called risks and uncertainties. This is just standard wording that our firm has been putting in all financial statements that have been issued. And it's essentially just a little disclosure about COVID and the pandemic and how there's so much uncertainties and it's difficult to really predict any type of impact, any financial impact or anything like that. So it's kind of just a little generic disclaimer stating that, you know, there is a lot of uncertainties surrounding that situation, but there haven't been any specific financial impacts that we needed to disclose here for this case. The supplemental schedule is schedule number 1. It's towards the back of the statements. This is just reviewing the budget to actual for the year. And really the biggest fluctuations here were just due to the timing of expenses and project closings. And then the last 2 pages are the report on internal controls. So essentially here, we're just noting that we considered the internal controls over financial reporting when we were planning and performing our audit. We took that into account when performing audit procedures, and we reviewed all of those internal control policies and documents. But we're not specifically giving an opinion over internal controls, but we did consider them in our audit procedures. Next, I can just quickly review the letters, but does anyone have any questions on the financial statements? Okay, and if you do after, just let us know, and you can always reach out to us directly after. That's totally fine as well. The next letter we wanted to review, this is called the SAS 114, or the letter to those charged with governance. This letter, it kind of has like the bold on it. It says like our responsibilities. It's different than the representation letter. The representation letter has all like the bullets on it. So with this one here, we're just stating our responsibilities as the auditor, express an opinion as a result of our audit of the financial statements, goes over management's responsibility for internal controls. And this is the letter where we would also communicate with you any significant issues that we encountered during the audit, but we did not encounter any issues or find any material misstatements that we would need to disclose to you. But if we did, that's where we would do that. And also, as previously mentioned, there were no new accounting standards, but if there were, we would also disclose those to you here. Excuse me. Next is the representation letter. And this just outlines all of management's responsibilities over the financial statements. This is the one that has all of the bullets on it. There were no significant changes to disclosures here. It's all standard wording as in the prior years. But this is the letter that we will need you to review, sign, and return to us. And then that way we can issue the final financial statements along with the returned attorney's letters that we've sent out about a week ago. So once we receive both of those items, we'll be able to issue the final reports for the IDA. And again, if anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to us at any point.
Great, thank you. Any questions or comments from the board? All right, thanks to everybody. Great to have a nice clean report. There are virtually no open items in this. As soon as we get the final correspondence on the bond confirmation, that we should be ready to submit. But great job getting all those bond confirmations in line on time this year. That was really fantastic, especially under the circumstances. So great job, everybody. If there's no other questions or comments on the audited financial statements, we will move on to the 2020 draft annual report. Sarah, you want to kick that off, please?
Sure, and can I note just a couple of things? One, Bob Schofield is here, so he made it for the tail end of the audit report. The bottom line there was a clean audit, no substantial findings. There are some notes that walk through. You've got everything in your packet for that, and there's also been an offer, as every year, to talk with Nate and Emily offline individually about anything in the report outside of staff as well. And so Nate and Emily, thank you. As always, Mark reported that it was a smooth and seamless process despite being virtual this year, a little bit different than handing over all the paperwork usually, but thank you very much for being flexible and easy when it came to all of that distribution. It was painless as far as we can tell. So that was great.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll keep you guys around for CRC, but move into the draft annual report. And I'll
to the full board, Sarah.
Oh, we should take thank you, Mark. Take a recommendation from the committee to move the acceptance of the audit findings to the full board.
Okay,
So
we'll take a
moved.
motion to accept the draft 2020 audited financial statements. Darius
Second.
and thank you. All in favor?
Aye.
Okay, we will move that to the full board with a positive recommendation. Thank you. And now we'll move into the 2020 annual report.
So you do have a draft copy of the annual Paris report. We did a lot of good talking around this at the Finance Committee, which you were all at yesterday. So we won't rehash all of that. Again, what I will note high level before I turn it over to Mark for any particulars, and then Andy for the jobs report that we did miss yesterday on the bonds portion of the report. A couple of quick things. This is a snapshot of 12/31 of last year. It is due at the end of the month. We are still making updates and edits through the end of the month. So this is pending any additional information we may receive or any edits to errors that we find. Other quick things of note, pages 3 through 6 of the report are the board information. So again, please check your individual information to make sure that we have that correct. Mark, anything else before we dive into the bonds jobs reporting?
No, nothing else. Just the note that you will see the financial statements are rehashed on the annual report, and then we go right to the jobs reporting.
Great. So I'd hand it over to Andy to run us quickly through the jobs reporting. Again, we did a full jobs report on the IDA street lease deals that'll be included in the packet. Again, I think that was pages like 18 through 98, something like that, of the individual project reports. We did miss the bonds, and there are a handful of those that Andy can run through the highlights quickly there.
Thanks, Sarah. This should be considerably shorter than yesterday. So on the IDA side, we currently have 13 open bonds. We've received jobs reporting on 9 of the 13. We're working to track down the 4 outstanding jobs forms, and we have received all the bond confirms for each of the projects. So I'll run down quickly the employment numbers for each bond. And this spreadsheet that I'm looking at and reading off of was made part of the board only materials that went out last Friday, and it will be listed as IDA bonds if anyone has that and wants to follow along. I'll start at the top. Brighter Choice has reported 79 jobs, which exceeds their original estimates to be retained and created.
That's nice to hear.
It is, and that's in line with how they've reported in previous years, which is also great to see given the current environment we're in. CHF Holland Suites 1 and 2 related projects reporting 4 jobs, which is in line with how they've reported in the past 4 years and with what they committed to. Corning Preserve is not reporting any jobs, nor have they, nor did they commit to any as part of that bond issuance. Creighton Story Homes is one of the projects we're working to pull jobs forms in from, and we expect to do that shortly. Daughters of Sarah reported 273 jobs, which exceeds the 211 that they projected to retain and create as part of this financing. The next 3 projects we are working to pull in at this time: Living Resources, New York State Research Foundation, and Prime Management. And again, we expect to pull those in shortly and have an updated spreadsheet. Renaissance Corp of Albany reported 5 jobs, which is 4 fewer than the 9 that were committed to being created as part of this bond issuance. And it is also in line with how they've reported in previous years. Rehabilitation Services reported 54 jobs, which is in line with previous years. Sage Colleges reported 365 jobs, which is in line with previous years, albeit just under their projected number. And South Mall Towers reported 9 jobs, 3 shy of the 12. And I know Joe Scott is with us today, and he can probably speak more eloquently to this than myself, but an interesting aspect of the bonds reporting, as opposed to straight leases, there typically aren't the stringent recapture provisions built into these older bond issuances.
And so similar to yesterday, this is the committee on top of the staff steps are really going through due diligence on jobs reporting. Anyone that has not responded yet, if we do received notice that their job projections are under what was anticipated. We'll be bringing those back to the Finance Committee directly, along with some of the other context that we're hoping to get from some of the straight lease deals that we were looking for more information from. So those will be at an upcoming meeting. But as of right now, we are racing to deadline on these. And as Andy said, we're working individually with the projects and expect to have full compliance on reporting by the end of the month. Thanks, Andy.
Great.
One more thing we're reporting
Any
this
other
year.
issues on the bonds or the Paris report?
Just one more addition to the annual report this year, Susan, is the reports on the grants that the IDA did approve. I just noticed on it, there's one thing that just needs to be corrected, that there isn't 64 variants of COVID, that it'll all say COVID-19 in the loan funds description. So we'll fix
I
that.
noticed that.
Oh, no.
I was wondering what's going on.
But other than that is pretty much, we have to report what was awarded to each of the firms that the board approved back in October this year.
Great.
So to clarify on that, there is a separate reporting sheet that goes to the authority's budget office that runs down each of the grants made. Those won't hit our actual Paris report as projects and grants made in that field until the funds are dispersed. So we would anticipate all of those to be 2021 Paris reports.
Oh,
Okay. Any other comments or concerns on the 2020 annual report? Do we need a recommendation on this to the full board, or was
We can take these all as one, the annual report, procurement, and investment report. We can do those all as one motion over to the board if we want to go through items C and D first. Take my one motion.
okay? Let's do that then. We'll move on to a review of the draft 2020 procurement report, please.
Go ahead, Mark.
So the procurement report is pretty simple. The IDA and any agency needs to report any procurement transaction that occurred during the year that was in total over $5,000. So as you can see in pages 2 through 6, those are all the agency transactions that were over $5,000 for calendar year 2020.
Great. All right. Any questions or comments about those particular pages in that report? If not, we'll move on to the draft 2020 investment report.
So the investment report is pretty simple. The IDA only has cash is in investments, cash and money market savings and checking account. So with that, it is audited as part of the 2020 financial statement audit from Teal Becker. So that is basically the one-page report.
Great. Any questions or comments from board members on that? All right. I think we should take the assessment of internal controls probably separately.
We can do that.
And we will take a motion to move these 3 items that we reviewed, the draft 2020 annual report, the draft 2020 procurement report, and the draft 2020 investment report with a favorable recommendation to the full board. We have a motion.
Susan, sorry, could we amend the motion to include any required updates by the end of the reporting period? Just for the extra wiggle room for any stragglers or typos by the end of the month.
Sure. With any additional changes that need to be made, please. Thank you. Second.
Second.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion is approved. And we will move on to agenda item E, review of management asset of internal controls and performance measures report.
So Mark and I are looking at each other for which one of us is going to jump in here. This is an annual requirement that we provide. There's not much different here. Mark, correct me if I'm wrong, from previous years that the committee has seen this. It does walk through our major business functions as well as our internal controls systems in place. There are some numbers that'll be updated once we have the Paris report finalized for the end of the year. But this is an administrative requirement of the committee.
Okay, and does this require a recommendation or is this just a review?
I believe, if I'm not mistaken, this one is a review.
Review.
Okay,
Think
great.
so.
All right, any questions on the management assessment of internal controls? All right, if not, we will move into other business.
None for me.
Okay, no other business. If no one has any other questions or comments, particularly for Emily and Nate, with regard to the audit financial statements, we will move to a very similar agenda for the CRC, and we will close this meeting at 1:29.
Motion.
We have a motion. Thank you.
So moved.
Second. All in favor?